good break? Welcome back to a brand new session of 2021 and 2022. So for this year in English, you have your main course textbook, that's the Beehive, and the supplementary textbook, that's the Moments. It's called as Moments. Okay. Now apart from that, we do have grammar portions and the writing skills. So all the best to all of you for the upcoming academic year. Now for this video, let's begin our grade 9 with a beautiful poem. Alright? But before we begin, I want you people to have a look at this animation. So, what do you see in this animation? Or what are you able to comprehend from what you see on the screen? Okay, so it's about a person having two choices. Okay, he's having two roads. He has to take one, but he is confused. Okay, so the poem we are about to do is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. So let's get more into the details. So as I told you, the poem is The Road Not Taken, written by Robert Frost. So in this poem, we are first going to see the introduction about the poet, the explanation of the poem, and the most important part, the poetic devices. Allow me to introduce you to the poem, The Road Not Taken. Okay, so here the poet comes across a path from which there are two words diverged. That means to separate. From the main path, there are two roads being separated, and the poet is confused here which road to take. Okay, so it is actually compared to the choices or the alternatives of our lives. Okay, the choices which we make in our lives. Okay, though we may have many choices, or though we may have many options, or let's say we may have different types of alternatives, but still we can choose only one. So this is the poem. It's a poem about how we make our choices. Okay, so let's see more about the poet. So as I told you, the poet is Robert Lee Frost, he is commonly known as Robert Frost. Okay, he was born on March 26, 1874 at San Francisco at the US in United States. He passed away on January 29, 1963, and he was aged 88. Okay, his main occupation, he is a poet and a playwright. His notable works are A Boy's Will and North of Boston. These are the two main notable works by Robert Frost. Right? So, as we know about the poet, let's get rhyming. Let's get into the poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Once the poet was walking down a path, right? When he reached a particular place, he happened to see that the path was dividing into two different directions. So that is called as diverged. Okay, see? Two roads diverged. That means as the poet was walking down the path, he happened to come across two different roads in a yellow wood. So what do you mean by yellow wood? It's not that the trees are painted in yellow. It means the leaves of the trees have started turning into yellow color. Okay? In better words, it is the season of autumn. So yellow woods means the season of autumn. And be one traveler, long I stood. So as the poet came across these two different roads, he stood in the intersection, or he stood in the center, and he was deciding what to do, and looked down one as far as I could. So the poet here tells us that he stood and he took his time to decide which road he has to take. He first looked at one particular road and he is analyzing the pros and the cons. And the next, he's looking at the next road, and again he is seeing what are the pros and cons, or what are the advantages and the disadvantages of taking this particular road. To where it bent in the undergrowth. So here, as I told you previously, the poet is standing. You need to imagine this. The poet is standing in front of the diverged roads, and he is analyzing both the roads. He's saying which is the best road and which is the road he has to take. He says that he is able to see the road for quite a long time, to a distance. He's able to see the road to a considerable amount of distance, but after that he's not able to see. So which is the place? Bent in the undergrowth. That means the road had a bend and undergrowth. That means the plants. The plants and the shrubs which are growing around started to cover the road. In the sense, he was not able to see the road further. The yellow wood in this stanza symbolizes the older generation, the people, the older people, okay, the older generation of people. So the poet is comparing his life to the people who are older than him, okay. So you remember the season of autumn, okay. And the next thing which the poet talks about over here is his situation, where he stands and he analyzes both the roads very carefully. Why? Because he wants to see which is the best road for him to travel on. So this symbolizes the choices. This is compared to the choices of our lives, the choices which we make in our lives. The first paragraph tells us that though we have many options, we as a single person are bound to choose only one. Though we have many alternatives, yet we can choose only one. So please remember, the first paragraph deals with the choice one makes. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. So this is the second paragraph, where we get to see that the poet still takes his time to decide which road he has to take. He looks at both the roads and he analyzes them carefully to see which is the best road. And finally, he decides to take one among the roads. Okay, he finally sees the other road and he decides to take a particular road because he feels that both the roads are equally good. The poet continues to say that he has chosen a particular path because he felt that it is better for him, as the path was grassy, and it tells him that not many people have used this path. So he says that not many people had walked on this path earlier, and that is why this path was grassy. And if you notice the words over here, wanted where. So the word where, it doesn't mean to put on clothes. It means that when you use something to a great extent, it gets spoiled. That's, you say, wear and tear. Yes? So that is the meaning over here. When something gets spoiled to a greater extent because we use it very often. So the phrase over here, and wanted where, means that it was not walked over by many people. So finally, after thinking a lot, the poet decides to go on his particular path, the path which he has chosen, believing that this particular path is not being used by anybody. But as he walks, after he reaches a certain amount of distance, he realizes that yes, this path is also or was used by some people. He realizes that both the paths are worn out because of people using it. Okay? So he realizes that it is not a path which is exclusively used by him alone. He realizes that there are many people who have used this same path before him. Okay? So this implies to our choices in our lives. Now, whichever option we choose, whichever alternative, we think so much when we have a problem in our life or when we have to decide on something, we think a lot about it. We do lots of research, we think over it, and then finally we decide, thinking that it is the best option for us. But please do realize that whichever option we take, we are going to have the same benefits, we are going to have the same advantages and disadvantages. Okay? So whichever option we choose, we will have both advantages and disadvantages in our lives, and we must be ready to face them at any cost. So the second stanza over here specifies that no matter what or which option we choose, we will have advantages and the disadvantages, but we have to face all the problems with our own willpower. We have to face them at any cost. that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. The poet in the third stanza says that both the paths were looking the same in the morning. Both of them had leaves and both of them were fresh. That means both the roads were not used by anybody that particular morning. The poet decides to take one particular path for that particular day, and he says that after some time he will come back and choose the other path. But he knows that there is no turning back from the option which he has chosen. He knew that he cannot come back and redo everything. So similar is the case or the scenario in our lives. As in, we have chosen something, we must go ahead with the same option. Life does not give us a second chance for us to come back, erase everything and choose the other option. Right? So we need to realize that there is no turning back from what we choose or the option which we choose. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. This is the final stanza where the poet says that in future he will take a deep breath. He will take a deep breath and he will say that there was a point of time in my life when I had only two options and I chose the road less travelled, or the road in which not many number of people have travelled. So this decision of his decided his future. So the poet says that in future I will tell my friends or whoever I meet that I came up with a problem or a situation in my life where I had to choose properly and wisely, and I am proud that I chose the right path. Though it was difficult, I chose the right path and now my life is good. Okay, so this is what the poet is trying to convey to us. We saw the recitation of the poem along with the explanation of each stanza. Now let's see more about the poem, that is the analysis of the poem. So the first part is the poetic devices, and then we have the rhyme scheme. So you know how to do the rhyming scheme I've taught you how to do it for each of the poems. So for us, the rhyme scheme in this poem is A, B, A, A, B. So without further delay, let's get to see the poetic devices of this poem. So the first poetic device is the symbolism. Again, I've taught you what symbolism is. So in this poem, the words two roads, okay, that symbolizes or it represents two or more choices in our life. Okay, so the next poetic device for you is the alliteration. Again, you know what is an alliteration. So wanted where. The sound of W is repeated. Okay, so that becomes the alliteration. And again over here, first, for. F sound is being repeated. Though, that. Again, the sound of K is being repeated. Okay. Now, the last one for you is anaphora. You pronounce it as anaphora. That means when a word. Anaphora, the poetic device. Anaphora, that means when a particular word or a particular phrase is being repeated in the beginning, that becomes your anaphora. Remember, when a particular word or a phrase is repeated in the beginning of the sentences, that becomes your anaphora. Okay, so the word and is repeated at the beginning of lines 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so these are the poetic devices for you. You need to remember this to have a good idea of the poem. We have dealt the poem in detail, the explanation and the poetic devices. So as we conclude, a small note for you. Remember, in future, you will have to make choices. You will have many options, okay, among which you will have to choose one particular option. Okay, you have to give it a lot of thought. You have to do your analysis and your research, because the option which you choose will shape your future. And again, remember, once you choose something, you cannot come back and redo anything. So this particular poem tells us, or it gives the message across to you students, that you have to make a bold choice, or you have to take the right decision for your future to be bright and wonderful. So the poem for you, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost.